Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Applications Committee meeting this evening. I'm Councillor David O'Mahony. I'm Chair of the committee. We are not expecting a fire drill tonight, but if the alarm sounds, you'll be directed to the nearest and safest exit by members of the team. I'd just like to introduce members of the public to the people here. On my left are members of the committee, and to either side of me are members of the planning team, legal and democratic services. Members of the committee, are you happy for me to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Jenny, do we have any absences?
Thanks, Chair. No, we don't have any apologies or substitutes.
Do any members have any declarations of interest before we start this evening? Councillor White.
I'd like to declare that I am the council's representative on Camberley Football Club, but I haven't been to any meetings and have had no conversations regarding this planning application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. In the case of 240673 FFU, the resident of the property is a friend of mine, but I come to the meeting with a clear and open mind.
Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. I'd like to repeat the declaration of the prior declaration for item number 4. I believe it's probably a blanket declaration, as most members of the committee have had correspondence or site visits, etc., with the applicant.
I believe so, yeah. Everyone's had correspondence with the applicant for loan. That's everybody. And Councillor Wilson?
I've got that same declaration. I've been to the site visit as well, so I know not everyone went to the site visit.
Lovely, thank you very much. First up tonight, item 4, planning application, loan St Catherine's Road, Frimley. This is deferred from the 17th of July meeting. Mr Drummond, Mr Williams, would you like to make the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to loan on St Catherine's. This application relates to loan on St Catherine's Road and comes before us today as it constitutes a major development. I would direct members' attention to the update sheet where there are some updates to report, including additional heads of terms in respect of securing the Village Transport Service Scheme, which is in effect the minibus service, the SAN contribution, as well as a contribution to be agreed for minor highway works in relation to railings to be installed to the footpath between St Catherine's Road and Berkeley Crescent. The application site occupies a plateau position just north of the settlement boundary of Frimley and Cranberley and is designated as countryside beyond the Greenbelt. Access is via a private track road from St Catherine's Road, which currently serves 3 dwellings. The site carries no other designations, is not subject to a tree preservation order and lies within a flood zone 1. The site contains an existing family dwelling with various associated outbuildings surrounded by formal landscaping before being enclosed by the woodland. There are no public vantage points of the site nor any notable views from neighbouring properties. The St Catherine's Sang, highlighted in yellow at the top corner of the map, is sited close to the site entrance. As shown, neighbouring properties are positioned away from the application site with intervening woodland providing separation. These images show the existing site access from St Catherine's Road, where there is a give way point when travelling south towards Lake Road. These views show the existing private track road serving the current properties. As demonstrated, this is a made road suitable for vehicle movement, whilst the gradient at 3.5% is also appropriate for walking, in line with the inclusive mobility guidance. Here we see Lowen House, the main dwelling. The property benefits from numerous ancillary outbuildings and a large formally landscaped garden. This shows the proposed site plan. The proposal would result in some tree loss. However, these would predominantly be category C or lower category trees, considered to be of a low quality. The development would remain contained within the wider woodland, with the proposal also delivering overall woodland enhancement through the planting of approximately 400 trees across the red and blue line boundary. This would increase diversity and the overall ecological value of the site, whilst providing immediate, medium-term and long-term benefits to the site. The development adopts a biophilic approach, connecting people with nature. And the landscaping proposals, including the woodland management, form an integral part of this concept. In relation to neighbouring properties to the east and west, there would be a minimum 40-metre separation distance between the site boundaries. Due to the site's topography and intervening woodland, there would be no significant views of development from these properties. These examples show the types of dwellings that would be provided on site. All dwellings would be between 1 and 2 stories in height and would incorporate a range of sustainable features, including PV panels and green roofs. The dwellings would be constructed using modern methods of construction, being built off-site, thus reducing the overall construction duration and development impact. Each would benefit from private gardens and sufficient internal space for all typical amenities. Low in house, the existing main dwelling would be retained and extended at ground floor level. The extensions would be proportional to the main building. The building would be converted to a community hub, hosting various facilities associated with the development, including a restaurant and dining facilities, laundry room, kitchen, office and meeting spaces, therapy and treatment rooms and gyms. These facilities would be available to the wider public. These sections through the site illustrate the low scale of the development in terms of its height, with low ridge heights throughout. The dwelling design, incorporating low eaves height and dark timber materials, further reduces the perceived visual impact. The sections also demonstrate how the development would sit holistically within existing and proposed landscaping. These indicative CGI images of the development help demonstrate the high quality envisaged for the scheme. These images further confirm the development's appropriately modest scale in relation to this woodland setting. The application was subject to a Stage 1 road safety audit, which provides an independent assessment of the highway in relation to the development. The purpose of this audit is to highlight any potential concerns that can be addressed through the development proposals. In this case, only a single issue was identified relating to the queuing at the access give-way area. To address this, the access would be resurfaced with a widened resurfaced area. Clear road markings would be installed, including a keep clear area, improved visibility and an enhanced crossing facility. This allows safe two-way movements into the site. Alternative site access was explored, but was considered unfeasible due to the topography and gradient, which wouldn't be suitable for motor vehicles. Whilst there is potential for an alternative pedestrian route from the site, this would result in significantly greater tree loss and associated implications. The proposed access track would be widened to a minimum 4.1 metre width, allowing safe passing of 2 vehicles, whilst numerous passing places would be installed, widening to 5.5 metres to accommodate larger vehicles. Additionally, a 1.8 metre footway would be installed on the access track for safe pedestrian and mobility scooter operation, in line with Surrey County Council Highway Design Guidance. Condition 23 required the detailed design of the access to be submitted to include details of lighting, rest areas and surfacing. To recap, the proposal comprises 49 extra care units, made up of 44 two-bedroom units and 5 three-bedroom units. The application would be subject to a Section 106 agreement, ensuring the development operates as a C2 use class, with age restrictions, a healthcare assessment, minimum level of care, and other requirements all secured as part of the agreement. The development is designed to be highly efficient while utilising efficient construction practices and being truly adaptable to residents' care needs, having adaptable internal layouts and utilising high-tech solutions to provide high-quality care for residents. The site is allocated within our draft local plan process for 60 units, which is more than the 49 units proposed today. As an allocated site, it was assessed as part of the Surrey Heath Sustainability Appraisal, performing well against the sustainability criteria, whilst there were no objections to the site's allocation, which included the site's existing access. As part of the emerging local plan process, the site would have been comprehensively assessed by independent assessors to determine the acceptability of its inclusion as an allocated site, which includes consideration of the various highway impacts. As part of the emerging local plan policies, there are no specific accessibility or highway-related requirements for this development to follow. The site also forms part of the Council's 5-year housing land supply, which we currently cannot demonstrate, as well as contributing to our significant level of need for this type of extra care development, as set out in the report. The site is considered sustainably located, being a 10-minute walk to the nearest convenience store and pharmacy, whilst all other amenities are located within a 1-mile radius via made footpaths. The site would also benefit from various on-site facilities, reducing the reliance to travel off-site. Where motor vehicles are to be used for trips, these would likely be for short trips, and therefore the development would be considered sustainable in line with the considerations of the NPPF. Over the most recent 5-year period of data, there have only been 2 highway incidents recorded within the locality, supporting the Stage 1 road safety audit conclusions that there are no major highway safety concerns in this location. The proposed development provides 1 vehicle space per unit, together with 24 spaces for visitors and 10 for staff and servicing. This is in addition to cycle parking and EV charging points in line with Surrey County guidance. Access is also provided to a village transport service, reducing the need for individual travel, whilst mobility scooters would also be made available for residents, which forms part of the baseline care package. In considering the trip impact, utilising TRIX data for similar developments, it is anticipated that the proposal would represent less than 4 and 9% of total cars during the AM and PM peak hour traffic, and 9% of cars during the after-school traffic at 3 PM. It is also worth noting that peak traffic for extra care development is typically between 10 and 11 AM, where residents aim to avoid the typical rush outside of school drop-off hours and when traffic movement is typically lower. A travel plan encouraging sustainable modes of travel is also to be secured by planning condition. Construction traffic would be subject to a construction management plan, ensuring no deliveries during peak hours and school pick-up and drop-off times. No objections have been raised by Surrey County Highways. As set out in the report, the proposal would result in a high-quality development, not only in its architectural design, layout and appropriate scale, but in respect of its sustainability credentials in construction and during the operational phase. The proposed tree loss would be largely restricted to lower quality trees, with all Category A trees to be retained. To mitigate against the tree loss, additional planting would be provided, particularly to the woodland, which would be enhanced to provide biodiversity net gain benefits in excess of requirements. The proposal would result in no significant harm to neighbouring occupier amenity, owing to the large separation distances, intervening woodland and the scale of development, whilst there would be no views from public vantage points. It would therefore be considered acceptable in character and appearance terms, amenity and all other regards. To summarise, the proposal concerns an allocated site within the draft local plan, where the site is earmarked for extra care development on this brownfield site, whilst it currently forms part of the Council's 5-year housing land supply. No accessibility, sustainability or other concerns have been raised as part of the draft allocation. Paragraph 11D of the NPPF is engaged as the Council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore there is a presumption in favour of granting permission, unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, the benefits relate to the widely recognised social and economic benefits regarding reduced pressures on the NHS, the freeing up of the housing stock, use of brownfield land, the contribution towards our overall housing need, and in particular our significant outstanding extra care need, whilst providing excess biodiversity net gain benefits and highway improvements. No objections have been raised by statutory consultees, while no significant harm has been identified. The proposal is therefore recommended for a grant of permission subject to Section 106, securing the eligibility criteria and provisions of the extra care use, including the use of the village transport service, financial contribution towards SAM and SANG, highway improvement works, travel plan auditing, and habitat management monitoring plan, as well as the biodiversity net gain. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Neville. We have a number of public speakers, both for and against, on this application tonight. First up, would I ask David Dixon to come up? Hello, Mr. Dixon. You have 4 minutes to make your speech. Second time round.
Do I get my picture?
Did you not get, do we have a picture? Do we have a picture? All right, lovely, thank you. You'll have 4 minutes, it'll be counted down, you'll be advised when you have a minute left. And you can start whenever you feel ready.
Okay, I have 3 new issues that I want to highlight. Issue 1 is tricks. I investigated how elevation of a site was taken into consideration and was surprised by what I found out. Tricks only considers elevation as an implicit consideration and states that, while not directly using elevation as a separate parameter, the location data within Tricks can indirectly account for elevation differences. For example, a development in a mountainous area might have a different trip generation pattern compared to a similar development in a flat area. My second point on Tricks, it identifies the need for further analysis. While Tricks provides valuable data, it's crucial to remember that it's a database and not a comprehensive predictive model. For developments with complex elevation challenges, further site-specific analysis might be needed to refine the trip generation estimates. This has not been done by Sage House. Frimley Green is assumed to be a flat area, particularly as you all know, the Balmoral estate opposite Learn was built on a flat agricultural farmland. The unique problems of Learn were not taken into account by Sage House when using Tricks, so the movements and access analysis to the site are totally inaccurate. Issue 2 is Sage House's other planning applications. I thought it worthwhile to look at the sites for the other Sage House planning applications in the UK to compare them with the Learn site. I found 3. Sage House lists Cambridgeshire, which proposes 23 properties on the edge of Fordham. The site is flat agricultural land. According to reports, this new home scheme was slammed as a wolf in sheep's clothing by a councillor because of the lack of enough affordable housing. The homes were also regarded as very expensive by the planning committee. The application so far has been rejected. Number 2, they list East Sussex, but the Heathfield and Walden Parish Council do not list any details of the planning application. Again, the area is flat land. Finally, Sage House lists Yorkshire in a village, Kirk Hamerton, between York and Harrogate. 61 retirement homes in a village, again flat land, but so far this has been refused by councillors because it's seen as an unsuitable location. But none of these have the challenges of the Learn location, and this has clearly not been taken into account in their planning application to this committee. Issue 3 is the impact of the location on the 49 over 65s that have a medical condition, a precondition for purchasing a Sage House home. Clearly not all medical problems will be the same, and there's no simple and seemingly magical solution to the complicated problem of navigating the steep slope down and back up between Learn and Tesco Direct. Using a Sage House mobility scooter, as suggested at the last meeting, is no silver bullet. There are slopes that present plenty of opportunities to overturn a scooter or a wheelchair. Some seriously disabled residents will not be willing to attempt to drive a mobility scooter down such a steep slope.
1 minute remaining.
While there will be others simply too nervous to try driving a mobility scooter at all. Others will be physically incapable of driving one. I have some experience of this issue as my wife has progressive multiple sclerosis and can no longer use a mobility scooter as she is subject to severe spasms. She can only travel via a wheelchair-accessible vehicle. To get to Tesco Direct or the bus stops requires those with medical issues to walk, use a wheelchair or a mobility scooter. Walking back up to Learn or pushing or using a wheelchair represents a much more extreme challenge because of the gradient, particularly if they are carrying shopping. This will make Sage House, for them, a prison for some. To understand what the difficulties are, I would like to challenge 2 on the planning committee that have not visited the site to use my wife's manual wheelchair from Tesco Direct to Learn. One to sit in it, the other to push it. I will even carry her shopping. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Members, do you have any questions for Mr Dixon as points of clarification on what was stated? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Mr Dixon, and thank you for the offer of pushing me in the wheelchair. So this path from the site to Tesco's, I was one of those that wasn't able to go on the site visit due to work commitments. Is it wide enough to fit said mobility scooter or wheelchair down?
The path that goes from the front gates down to the cutting down into thing is not wide enough in one place. It's very, very tight. I understand one of the councillors has actually measured it, and it's too tight for a large mobility scooter.
So although you might be able to get some of the distance, you wouldn't be able to get a mobility scooter or a wheelchair down based on your...
Yeah, it depends on the
terrain.
size. Obviously, you get different sizes of mobility scooters,
Thank you.
but the larger ones, no.
Thank you.
Members, do you have any other questions? Mr Dixon, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We have a second public speaker in objection to this application. I'd like to call up Richard Nussey. Thank you, Mr Nussey. You have 4 minutes to make your statement. You'll be counted down by Democratic Services and they'll remind you when you have a minute left. Thank you very much. You can start when you are ready.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to attend this meeting, my second visit. My name is Richard Nussey. I live in Regent Way, which, as most people will know, runs into St Catherine's where the development is, and this development is proposed some distance behind my house on the other side of the Sangs. I talk about we, I'm talking about members of the community, primarily on our road. We're all very connected through WhatsApp and all the usual connectivity. And quite universally, we object to this development, primarily on the basis of the connection to, proposed connection to St Catherine's Road. And we take it to be unsafe, the proposal, and we take issue with the fact that the County Highways Authority considered that it to be acceptable in relation to access, sighting and impact on the highway. At the previous meeting, I described our objections to proposed development, the loss of amenity to the local population and others if the triangular space at the entrance is adopted by the development. I noticed since the last meeting there's been a proposal to allocate one car parking space, so that's at least a 75% reduction in what we have at the moment. So there's still a loss of amenity there. We have serious safety concerns over the proposed layout of the entrance, and the siting of the development raises many concerns for the morning and evening when large numbers of students make their way, not always in a straight line, shall I say, across the entrance, sideways across it, at right angles to it, on foot and on bicycles, and we think this is a serious problem, which is not going to go away, and it's caused by the choice of this site. There are poor sight lines in each direction, and this is a significant concern for the safety of the design, and at peak times, many school students walk or cycle across this entrance, as I've said. As part of this assessment, and we believe that there's still some more assessment to be done on this before considering approval of it, we propose that the pedestrian, cycle and vehicle traffic at the entrance triangle be quantified by videoing it during the morning and evening rush hour once the school term has recommenced. From this, statistics can be produced which will be far more useful than the simple data collected by a conventional tyre count type of equipment with a rubber strip across the road. The video would need to be done during the school term time.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. And analysed digitally to produce the statistics required. We believe this is the only way in which this complex site at the end of the proposed development can be assessed from a safety point of view. Otherwise, there's going to be some serious accidents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Nussey. Members, do you have any questions, points of clarification for the speaker? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Reference the tyre count you mentioned. Has there been the I don't know what they call them, the strips outside that bit of road?
Well, I walk up there regularly, primarily on a Saturday for newspaper, but I go walk up that road probably 3 times a week in total, and I do notice, I don't know if David might be confirm it, but there was a rubber strip across there and a little electronic box strapped to a lamppost. I would suggest it's over a year ago, and I've tried various methods of getting this from county councillors to get the data, because I believe it to be public data, and I've not succeeded. But that will only give you the vehicles. It's not going to give you the cyclists and all of the youngsters crisscrossing that triangle, which they do. It is it's mayhem in the morning.
And let's follow up to that. When it was there, was it when the schools were on holiday or when the schools were in school?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's fine.
I need prior discussion to go and find that out. But I'm sure Surrey County Council will know.
Members, do you have any other questions? Mr. Nisi, thank you very much for your time. You've returned to your seat. We have one more public speaker for this application tonight. I'd like to call up Ian Warner. Hello, Mr. Warner. Hello. You have 4 minutes to speak. Democratic Services will time you down. They'll advise you when you have a minute left to go.
Dear councillors, thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening in relation to Sage House Living's proposals to deliver an IRC at Lowen, St Catherine's Road. This application has been the process of engagement with officers for more than 5 years, culminating in not only this application, but a site-specific draft allocation in your emerging local plan, which is due to commence examination in less than a month's time. This application therefore embodies the spirit of collaboration with officers to bring forward proposals that reflect a clearly identified need in a manner that has been supported on all technical levels by all statutory consultees. Sage House Living recognises there will be disruption or some disruption from their proposals. However, they've amended their scheme to purposefully minimise the impacts on local residents through the following. They've pursued a specialist older person scheme with on-site facilities, thus reducing the impact on local facilities and reducing trip generation. They are developing low-rise bungalows and cottages to reduce visual impact from the surrounding woodland. They're purposely undertaking construction via MMC, which will reduce construction traffic by 50%. Following the deferral of this proposal last month, we provided clarity on the technicalities of our proposals, as set out in our letter dated 12th of August in your update. We've demonstrated that there are no feasible alternatives for a pedestrian route from the site due to physical gradient of the site and the need to comply with DDA requirements, whilst also evidencing why the current route is compliant. That's further evidence through a letter of support from the current tenants of the cottage on the application site, confirming that neither they nor their 81-year-old mother-in-law have ever had an issue in terms of gradient along the access road. Our additional information similarly details the accessibility of pedestrian routes from the site to local facilities. We've also indicatively shown how parking could be provided in relation to the Sangland without compromising the access to the site. In regard to general location of the site, we've explained how our proposals would seek to encourage greater integration between residents and those in the surrounding area, and how this location is no different to the majority of operational IR schemes across Surrey. Indeed, such locations are typical of what is sought for such sites. Finally, we provided clarity on how, via the mechanism of a Section 106 agreement, the village transport scheme would operate, as well as controls that would apply regarding qualifying persons for the scheme, again taking on board the queries previously raised on the matter. We therefore sought to fully engage with all the comments raised at the previous meeting, whilst not losing sight of the wider benefits that such a scheme can provide to meeting a pressing and evidence-based need for specialist elderly housing in Surrey Heath. While members must balance concerns raised by local residents against the acknowledged benefits of such schemes, we respectfully ask that you carefully consider your office's conclusion in presenting this scheme with a recommendation for approval, subject to planning conditions and a legal agreement. Your officers have concluded this scheme complies with the adopted plan and have also considered the emerging plan, specifically allocating this site for use, albeit at a higher density with 60 units.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. We endorse that conclusion and respectfully ask that you consider the macro issues of the crucial need and benefits for this type of elderly housing in the borough, alongside the micro issues of the proposal, and support them in improving our application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Members, do you have any questions or clarification for Mr. Warner? Would you like to return your seat? Thank you very much for coming up again. We have a councillor who wishes to speak on this application. If I could ask for Alan Ashbury to start making his statement. Mr Ashby, you have 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this again this evening. And again, I'd like to thank Mr Rahman for his detailed presentation, laying out the facts of the application. Once again, I'm here this evening with a couple of hats on. I'm a ward councillor for Frimley, and a number of the residents have written to me and asked me to raise their concerns about this development. I'm also a resident of the area who understands and suffers the lived reality of those residents, what we see from our front room windows rather than what a TRICS database tells us is happening on our estate. I don't intend to go through all of the points I raised last month, but I feel some of them bear reiterating. I believe there is a fundamental flaw in the assessment carried out by the Highways Authority, and I believe the access to the site is inadequate, and I would call upon the committee to consider rejecting the application pending a total rethink of the access, or implementing a condition that the access to the site be moved to a location where pedestrian danger will not be increased. I'm aware that the last time we heard that moving the access was not possible, and we've heard it again this evening, but I think there are options, albeit expensive ones, which may affect the profitability of the site for the developers and the owners. Possibility or profitability? I think the second is what is being offered as the reason why it can't be done. I recently met with officers from Surrey County Council who introduced their ideas on LSIs, or local street improvements. LSIs are a key programme underpinned by the Surrey County Council's LTP4 Transport Planning for Place policy. This development and the assessment of the Highways Authority does nothing to look at the issues raised in their own policy. What is the point of a policy if it's going to be ignored? The area of housing, comprising the estate, Tomlins Avenue, Alphington Avenue, Regent Way, etc., has become the de facto bypass route for traffic wishing to avoid the carnage of the Frimley Park Hospital roundabout. And with everyone using GPS these days to find the quickest routes, delivery drivers in particular, whether supermarket or online shopping, are all being diverted through our estate in order to meet their very tight schedules. Every new development in the area, so Kiva Drive with 60 homes, Mindenhurst 1200, Mighty Site in Frimley Green 160, Water's Edge in Mitchett 248, and the former Siemens Square site round the corner 170 homes, all elicit the same response, that there is no adverse impact on the road network. Now, with this development, that is a total of 1,887 new homes in the area with no need, according to Highways, to improve the road infrastructure. If I were a committee member, I would wish to question the Highways Authority on where the effects of these incremental changes are considered, as they're not considered at every individual application. Looking at the sustainability of the proposal, if I were a committee member, I would be interested in the percentage of residents in these type of developments who bring their own car with them. I'm guessing it must be fairly high, as they've requested one space per home, which with the staff and the visitors makes a mockery of the data presented from TRICS. I would also wish to know the exact assumptions used when interrogating the TRICS database in order to determine the numbers quoted. I suspect that, like most computer systems, garbage in equals garbage out. So if the assumptions do not reflect the reality of the site, with a requirement for over 80 car parking spaces, then it is no wonder that I and the local residents query the numbers given in the officer's report. I would also question, if they were confident in the numbers, would they accept a condition along the line saying this would be the maximum incremental traffic allowed, with a commitment to tackle the issue if this number were to be exceeded? I believe that this is contrary to policy IN2 in the current emerging local plan, which states at point 2 that new development will be required to provide and or fund the provision of suitable access and transport infrastructure and services that are necessary to make it acceptable, including the mitigation of otherwise unacceptable impacts on highway safety and or any severe residual cumulative impacts on the road network. Consideration that I don't believe has been fully explored is the impact on the number of school children who walk down this very narrow access road. It is acknowledged in the report that the current footpath provision on St Catherine's Road does not meet current guidelines. and yet there are no proposals to retrofit to modern day standards, despite the hundreds of children using this route to access the 4 schools in the area: Tomlinscote, Ravenscote, St Augustine's and the Grove. I've been running a petition on the SCC website calling for traffic calming in the area to be considered. Parents who do not feel that their children are safe walking to school are taking the matters into their own hands. And out will come more cars, leading to more congestion. On an estate with a total of around 450 homes, 124 people took the trouble to register on the Surrey County website and sign this petition, which I believe shows the depth of concern of local residents. I shall be presenting to the County Council Cabinet member in September. The County Council are already consulting on traffic calming measures for the roads in front of these schools, but seem oblivious to the fact that hundreds of children use the back entrance accessed from our estate. The current access to the site is very narrow, and we've already discussed about the parking for people using the Sang. I believe there has been a change to mitigate giving one space for the Sang users, but I also question the contractors who use the current spaces for their lorries to empty the bins, etc. on the Sang. Where are they to park? I guess they'll just have to block St Catherine's Road. This development will result in a development of a completely separate, let's call it a compound, which will not be integrated into the wider community of Frimley. Those residents without cars will simply be trapped, having to run the gauntlet of steep hills and a very narrow footpath if they wish to walk anywhere. I have measured the width of the footpath on the opposite side of St Catherine's Road, which is the only footpath that residents could use. I believe current standards require a footpath of a minimum of 1.5 metres in width. This footpath is at most 1 metre wide, narrowing in places to around 800 millimetres.
1 minute
much
remaining.
too narrow for a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, meaning that residents will be dependent upon car transport. In summary, there are positive aspects to this application. However, I have some grave misgivings. Creating a compound on the edge of our community where the residents do not integrate with the wider area does not contribute to community cohesion. Without a car, the residents of the new development will be confined to the compound. The access to the site is totally unsuitable, coming off a single track road that is used by hundreds of school children every day. I am aware that the increased traffic in this area from recent developments, many of which are still to be completed, cannot be laid at the door of this development. But this is potentially the straw that breaks the camel's back. Elderly or less able people, coupled with school children on a very narrow road, on a rat run that is only going to get busier and busier, is a recipe for disaster. If the committee are minded to grant, in line with the Office of Recommendation...
That's 8 minutes, thank you.
Can I ask that they consider conditions that either move the access from this inappropriate junction or impress on highways the need to urgently fix this area before someone, probably a child, is seriously hurt or worse? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashbury. Strange you mentioned Surrey Highways. They're next. Members, do you have any questions to ask of Councillor Garrett?
I've got 3, one for each hat. First hat, as a resident, how does the lived reality differ from the tricks reality, from what you've experienced? I suppose the second hat would be your portfolio hat. What will the adverse effects of all these developments suddenly being finished be on the road? And the third one, probably your ward councillor hat. Surrey, or during the officer's presentation, it mentioned 2 incidents in the last 5 years. Do you know what those incidents were at all? And if so, can you give us some information on that?
I'll take them in the order that I think you asked them. The lived reality of living on our estate is, and it was summed up a couple of weeks ago when the M3 was closed for the weekend. The total traffic chaos in the area of people not following the Surrey County Council diversions, but following their in-car sat-navs led them all down through very narrow roads. I mean, at parts, St Catherine's Road is single track. That is happening more and more and more, particularly with big white vans. They're not all white, some of them are grey and some of them say Amazon and some say Tesco, etc. But more and more, the lived reality is there is more and more of that where people are avoiding the hospital roundabout, which is where we would like the traffic to go, on the Frimley bypass, not through the residential streets. My concern on that is, as I've said, that nearly 2,000 homes have been given permission in a very small area of people who will cut through the estate. Add to that 4 schools, with Tomlinscote in particular having a 10-class intake every year now, so that's 1,500 pupils, many of whom use the rear entrance and walk from Balmoral Drive through the estate. I am concerned that extra traffic, we may not, to come to your third question, we may have only seen 2 accidents, and neither of those fortunately resulted in a fatality. But that number will only increase. I've lived on the estate for many years. It used to be a quiet residential area. Now it feels a little bit like a racetrack at certain times of the day. I've forgotten what your second question was, Councillor Garrett. I do apologise. Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. Councillor Asprey, as you know, we must as a committee give significant weight to the upcoming local plan approved by the council. That was for up to 60 homes rather than the 49 proposed here. Are you not concerned that a future application could be for 60 and realistically that would be approved by the inspector because it's in our local plan? So surely is that something that you think we should consider now? And do you not agree that a lot of the factors I think you've raised quite fairly should have been considered when the emerging local plan was drafted, and now kind of the onus is on us to refuse it now, but really the council should have done a better job of scrutinising the local plan at the start? What's your view on that?
So the first question is about the local plan and this site. Am I concerned that if we reject this one, we'll get a development for a greater number? And what would happen on appeal? I believe this committee quite correctly looks at applications on their merit rather than thinking what would happen if it goes on appeal, as has been evidenced by recent decisions made by this committee. So I would ask that this be considered similarly. I believe that the scrutiny of the local plan, I believe this site could be used for this type of housing. I believe the access that is currently proposed from where it is proposed is totally incorrect. If you move the access beyond the alleyway that leads down to Berkeley Crescent on the estate, the other estate, then you would do away with the need for school children to be impacting with traffic, because very few children walk the other part of St Catherine's Road, which has no street lights and no footpath. It is literally reading from Balmoral Drive through Berkeley Crescent up that alleyway. So that is my view, is this site should and could be considered in the local plan and has been. The access to the site is what is causing my major concern.
Thank you, members. That answered your question?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, if I can just follow up, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the local plan it did show the current access as being the access as well. That's the only thing I think maybe we'll have difficult grounds refusing it based on the access.
I don't believe that the site allocation in the local plan specifically referenced the current access as the only way in and out of the site. The current access is suitable for a single family dwelling. It's not suitable for a community like this, in my opinion.
Thank you, councillors. as this was deferred from the last meeting, we posted some questions to Surrey Highways, and we have Kirsty online, I believe, from Surrey Highways.
Hello, yes, Chair, I'm here, yeah.
Thank you for attending tonight. I just wonder if we could read out some of the questions which I believe you've been pre-warned about, and maybe you could answer those questions. Are you okay with that?
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, let me just find my... Oh, so the first two questions are from me. We have on the screen here, I'm not sure you can see it, the proposed parking highways consideration based on the application. My first question is, what data, what numbers are actually entered into Trix and Tempo or any other modelling software for this development? And my second question was, how are the results weighed against the NPPF and our own emerging Surrey local plan?
Okay, so in terms of Trix, it's a national database where data is collected across a number of sites in different locations and different sizes and different use classes by independent surveyors from the Trix organisation. And when you then come to assess a planning application, you can filter out the different surveys to ensure that you're picking sites similar to the one that you're assessing. But in terms of the data that is put into the system, it is all from the independent surveyors at Trix. And then we, as the County Highway Authority and developers, will have access to the Trix system. And then we can carry out our own Trix analysis for the development in question. I'll touch on Tempro, although that will not have been used for this site specifically. Tempro uses data from DFT and the Office of National Statistics, and that looks at future forecasting. So say you had a development with a long build-out period, you'd be able to look at the impact of that development in future year scenarios, taking into account population growth and economic growth. And again, the data put into the system is completely independent. It's not done by the developers or the highway authorities or anyone like that. So in terms of the data that we're using, it's done independently with no impact on those putting forward the development.
Sure, but what numbers would you actually plug in to Trix for this application? Would you put in 49 dwellings? Would you put what we have here in front of us, or what specifically would you put? You also said that Tempro is not used, which looks through to the future events of the area, how it's going to be working. Would that have included the 1,800, nearly 2,000 new houses in the immediate area?
So Tempro would have that in the system if it's within the data that I said, so DFT or Office for National Statistics. If they have that data, then that will take into account in terms of, I guess, population growth, because there'd be increased housing in the area.
But you didn't use Tempro on this application. That's what you stated.
The transport consultant will not have used Tempro because the site's, in terms of its scales, quite minor, and in terms of its build out period, it wouldn't need to look at those future forecasts. You're looking at the impact now for this type of development. Tempro will be used for much larger strategic sites. So if you're looking at the impact now, which is what we would for this type of development, you wouldn't need to use Tempro.
Right, but you can see it from the local person's point of view, whereby we've had nearly 2,000 units, housing units, being built in the vicinity. Although this site in isolation is minor, in a broader scale for the bigger area, for the residents of that area, it has a big impact. And if you're saying it's not important enough to actually introduce the modelling required to see how it adds to an already larger number of houses.
Yeah, it's because the impact from this site will be negligible in terms of the numbers. So if you were to add these numbers to the junctions in the area, because that's what you'd be looking at in terms of improving the junction capacity, it's going to be a very negligible impact.
I just thought it'd be helpful to come in here because this site does form part of the transport assessment for the local plan. So it was considered as an in-combination impact of all the proposals up to 2038, and that transport assessment found there's no significant impacts on the local road network. So I just thought that was useful to come in because it has looked at it in a broader sense, and that is specific on the allocation, but I just thought that was a helpful clarification.
I've just got some questions from another councillor. Councillor Garrett, would you like to read your questions out?
Thank you, Chair. And Kirsty, thank you for your time this evening. Hang on, take my glasses off. So the data from Trix, I think, because the question here, I think you've already answered some of that. So does the modelling take into account real live information, such as bus services, trains and pinch points on local roads? Now, I get that the data's coming in from a local database, which can be from anywhere in the UK, but I would argue that every single road is unique to the area which it's in, because I have been to a number of sites on two in the last 2 or 3 months where local councillor knowledge differs from the response we are getting from Trix data. And that Trix data, based on what you've said, is based on a national picture and not a local picture. So we're told by officers we have to rely on the data that we are given. And as a councillor, I'm beginning to struggle on whether I trust the data. So I want to really get a good picture of how up to date is this information? How regularly is it up to date? If this case here is being done in Frimley, are we looking at roads in Sunderland where the traffic may be less? And my final question, which I didn't put on here, is I recently noticed within the road around the corner from me, we had 2 of those black strips that appeared, which I'm guessing is measuring traffic, which is brilliant. It's outside of school, which is brilliant. The cables arrived 2 weeks after the schools went on their summer holiday. So if we're relying our Trix data on data from this sort of information, surely we should be considering it before and after school. And I can tell you as a resident, I have never ever seen that before until 2 weeks after the school went on holiday. So I'd like to understand that information as well, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with your first question, although I may have to ask you to repeat, sorry. So the data, yes, it is from national surveys, but what you would do is you would remove those that didn't suit the parameters of the site that you're looking at today. So I ran my own Trix analysis for this site, and I would remove Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, things like that, and then make sure you've got the right location in terms of edge of town centre or suburban. And yes, of course, it isn't a survey done in Frimley. I'll be honest about that. But what it does, it gives you an average trip rate for sites of similar size, scale and location, which we can then use to give a suggestion of the impact or possible impact of a development of this size. It's used on all planning applications, and I know you said that you have to take it as read, but we believe that it is a suitable way of looking at trips that will be generated from this potential site. And Trix are looking at doing further assessments whereby they're going to carry out surveys at sites with, when they put in the transport assessment saying this is the predicted trip rate, they're then going to do follow-up surveys, and in some situations it's shown that actually the numbers within transport assessments are actually greater than what the development produces. So there is that to bear in mind as well. In terms of the measuring of the traffic counts, and you said that they were done after the schools broke up on holiday, those could have been put down to measure speed, which isn't impacted by school holidays. We do accept surveys in neutral months and July and August would fall out of that. Whereas the surveys done for this application were done in June. And although I note that there are concerns that some of the school pupils will have broken up by then, June is still considered a neutral month in terms of transport assessments.
Okay, thank you.
Have I missed anything?
No,
Yeah,
that's fine. You've answered my questions. I just want to follow up on the last point about speed. So, without getting technical, these cables that are in the middle of the road, how do they measure speed? Is it because they've got the front tyres going over and then the back tyres going over and they can calculate the speed, or are there meant to be two fixed points?
No, it should be if there are two black lines, that will pick up on the speed, and also the type of vehicle, because I noticed that was mentioned earlier in one of the presentations. I'm not sure what was used for this particular application, but most surveys would pick up on all types of vehicles, because that's what you do want to assess for different types of sites. You want to see the number of cyclists, number of HGVs, etc. on the road.
Okay, final question. This TRIX data, is it available for us to ask for, or would that have to be an FOI?
I'm not sure. You have to be a member to access it, so I guess it'd be an FOI. I'd have to check with my manager if what we're able to share. But I mean, I could share with you my TRIX analysis if that's what you're asking.
Okay, it was just a general question, really. I don't think I specifically want it for this in this case, but thank you very much for your help.
Thank you, Councillor. We have some more questions from Councillor David Whitcroft.
Thank you. Yes, if I may, before I get to the actual questions I gave notice of, I'd just like to continue this discussion about the TRIX data, if I might. I may have got this wrong, but it seems to me that what the data is telling us up there is that we've got a development of 49 properties made up of people exclusively over 65, with a very large allowance made for parking on the site. And it seems to me that we're being asked to accept that this development is going to develop only 14 arrivals between 8 and 11 a.m. 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. And that's residents, staff, carers, visitors and services. And does that seem reasonable to you?
I think given the size of the development, and as I say, we do go by the TRIX analysis, which does give an average, then yes, it is a reasonable amount of trips that would be predicted for this type of development.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Whitcroft, if I can just refer you to the update sheet. In section 4, trip rates, it sets out the trip numbers associated with 49 dwellings as currently proposed, what was proposed as part of the extra...
I'm sorry, where am I supposed to be looking?
On the update sheet, the supplementary document,
Right.
section 4, trip rates, it sets out the trip generation numbers over the course of 12 hours. So during the 8 to 9 a.m. peak hour, there'd be 8 two-way movements between the peak hour development.
It's on the supplementary, which is on Modern Gov. Correct. The email also circulated to all members. Thank you.
It starts on page 8 of the supplementary document.
if you can't see the supplement, then...
Okay, I'll, yeah.
So that's all those ones, don't they? Maybe that 12
Just to add, that ad provides a useful comparison of what this development would propose in terms of trip figures, what a 60-unit development as set out in the local plan for this type of development would propose, and what the alternative of 49 C3 dwellings would propose, which would be considerably greater.
Right, so this data is completely different from that which was originally presented.
No, it was not. I mean, the data that was originally presented as on the screen now shows the peak hours during the AM and PM, and then also the 10 and 11 peak hour, which is for extra care development.
Okay, thank you. Right, to go back to the pre-advised questions then. We've heard a lot this evening about the proposed access, both from the public speakers and from Councillor Ashbury, the access to the Lowen development. And the comment has been made that there are going to be problems, safety problems, especially with pedestrians, resulting from the narrowness of the road, the lack of continuous footpaths on both sides, and the heavy use by Tomlinscote students twice daily. There's also, of course, the question of some 200 plus local residents who've stated that granting planning permission will jeopardise the safety, particularly for school children, of this road. Can you comment on that, please, and give a view on the opinions expressed by people who live on the ground? Thank you.
Yes, no, that's fine. We completely understand residents' concerns, and we do, I have to say, we do read objection letters when we're forming our assessment. In terms of the access itself, we do believe it is safe, both for vehicular use and pedestrians. There's sufficient visibility in all directions. There's going to be sufficient width for simultaneous entrance and exit. And then in terms of pedestrians, it will almost be slightly improved because part of the proposals is to include a footway on the access road with an informal crossing across St Catherine's Road. I wasn't aware that children use the Sangs to then access the school and their houses. So hopefully the implementation of that footway and informal crossing point could actually maybe improve the access for students as well. But yeah, we do understand the concerns, but we don't believe that a site of this scale, with those mitigation measures and improvements implemented, we don't believe there will be a road safety issue.
Just to be clear, are you saying that you weren't aware that Tomlinscote School was accessed along this road by a very large number of school children, or did you say something slightly different from that?
I understand where the school is and I understand where houses are, and I assumed that they used the footway on St Catherine's Road, but I might be wrong, what I've picked up on discussions tonight, that they use the Sang access potentially is what people have been concerned about, because I thought people said they were concerned about school children's safety. So I assume they're using the access on the side of the site. If they're not, then there's a continuous footway at this point on St Catherine's Road. So then it's still not a concern for Highway Authority.
Okay, I think the point that was being made, particularly by one of the public speakers, was that at busy times, and I think we all know what schools are like at arrival and departure times, there are an awful lot of people, school children in particular, milling around the area of the entrance to the development. I think that was the point that was being made, and that has obvious impacts on sight lines and all the rest of it. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, if residents, students, pedestrians are going to be within the vicinity, I mean, in terms of the development itself, it is providing a safe access with sufficient visibility. So that is what we would assess it on. I mean, maybe the new layout will demonstrate to students that it is, you know, a formal access to a development, and they will hopefully use the new footway that's to be provided.
Okay, thank you. With your indulgence, Chair, two very quick final points. In your view, would the removal of the proposed electric gate at the entrance improve the access and thus the safety at the site? And secondly, on a practical note, is it correct that the traffic data was collected in June when Tomlinscote students' use of the road was reduced due to a lot of them taking exams at that time? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the gate, from a high-risk perspective, it is set back a sufficient distance from the highway edge that we wouldn't comment on its removal or retention. So I wouldn't say it would improve safety, no. In terms of the school and the surveys, I think I touched on that earlier, answering another councillor, but yes, they were undertaken in June. You can see that in the transport statement submitted in the appendices. But as I said, it is a neutral month, but I do understand the concerns of councillors that some school children would potentially have finished and therefore their trips not being taken into account. But I guess in terms of that, the number of trips for this site is negligible in terms of those already on St Catherine's Road. So if further surveys were to be undertaken when everyone was at school, say, we would still have the same result in terms of the impact of this development on St Catherine's Road and the surrounding highway network.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, thank you for that. Those responses have been very clear, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Abel, you can have the last question to Surrey Highways.
Thank you. Sorry this wasn't pre-submitted, but it came out of your conversation where you talked about the methodology for arriving at the TRICS data, and you said the data, you start off with the data and then disallowances are made. And I just wondered, is that discard or disregard, is that an objective decision subject to set criteria, or is the discard a subjective decision? And if it's subjective, what are those criteria for disregard in arriving at the data that's been presented to us?
So, so the developer, the transport consultant for the developer will do their own TRICS analysis. And in terms of the data that you remove, it's ones that are not similar to the site that you're looking at, because that would then, give you incorrect data. It could suggest lower trip rates. It could also suggest higher trip rates, depending on which parameters you choose. So, I mean, the first one is land use type. So for this, it would be assisted living or retirement home. You can then filter it by development size, as I said earlier, regions, and then the key one would be location type. So you wouldn't pick town centre surveys for this site, for example, because that would then skew towards even more access to sustainable transport than this site has. But then that's why we, as Highway Authority, will also run our own TRICS analysis to check that we'd get similar results. And if we didn't get similar results, we would then question the transport consultant and ask them to redo it.
Members, do you have any other questions of highways? Sean, really? One last.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier on that you've done surveys after a development has gone in and compared it to TRICS data. Have you got any that you've got for Surrey Heath that we maybe could have back at some point in the future? Because it might be handy to see the proof is in the pudding. I said it'd be quick.
Yes. So just to clarify on that, it's the TRICS organisation that carry out the surveys after the development has been occupied, and that actually then adds to the data in the database. But I can check with them to see if there are any specifically for the Surrey Heath area. In terms of surveys that Surrey County Council do, we do have a team that carry out surveys, so I can also see if there is any data within the vicinity of the site if you'd like to see it, but I assume you'd want to see it once or if this development is occupied.
Yeah, Kirsty, I think we're just looking for a bit more opaqueness going forward so we understand how the methodology behind the decisions that are being taken. I know you're saying it's using TRICS, but there's obviously subjective decision making as well. So if we could have a look at some of those previous ones just so we can familiarise ourselves, and then going forward maybe work on something a bit more opaque for us to understand.
Yeah, that's fine.
So thank you very much for your time. I do have one last question. If you make an assessment on the site and highway improvements are required, who would foot the bill for that generally?
If highway improvements are required, our starting point would be to request the developer to implement the highway improvements through Section 278 agreement. So as they will with their access, they will require a Section 278 agreement to implement that and the footway and the crossing. Depending on what we're asking for, we can also go down the Section 106 contribution route.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Members, do we have any discussion on this? We did discuss it at length last week. Do you have any questions of the officers? Okay, the officer's recommendation is to grant subject to conditions and legal agreement. Need a proposer and a seconder. Proposer Jonathan Quinn. Anybody wish to second this? Seconder Kevin Thompson.
So all those for the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions and a legal agreement, please raise your hand. This is 4. So that's not unanimous. So keep your hands up and I'm going to call out your names. So that's Councillor Sean Garrett, Councillor Mary Glowett, Councillor Liz Noble, Councillor David O'Mahony, Councillor Jonathan Quinn, Councillor Kevin Thompson, Councillor Victoria Wheeler, Councillor David Whitcroft, Councillor Helen Whitcroft, and Councillor Richard Wilson. All... What are you voting for, Councillor White? 4. So that's Councillor White.
Is that unanimous?
Sorry, Jamie.
So that's unanimous?
Yep, carried.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Has been granted subject to conditions and legal agreement. On to item number 5, application for Crooners Park, Crooner Road, Camberley. Mr. Carty, if you would like to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Doesn't seem to be working. proposal relates to the Camberley Town Football Club site in a defined green space within the settlement of Camberley. The site is owned by this council but leased to the football club. The current proposal is a scale back compared to the approved redevelopment scheme approved in 2015 and now expired. On the update are amendments to the proposed conditions. I'll briefly go through those. Condition 2 picks up the latest amended drawing, and that's for the site, for the cross-section. Condition 5 picks up some of the agreed details, elevation, sighting, and an initial lighting report, and relates them to the first use of the pitches for preciseness. Condition 9 applies the standard wording for the implementation of approved details. And Condition 12 allows exceptions to clubhouse opening hours to mirror better the existing licence and hours of illumination reflected to allow afternoon illumination during use in winter and poor lighting conditions. I will now lead you through the plans and photos. The site location plan on the left hand side of the slide shows the football ground with the associated buildings to the north of the existing grass pitch, including the clubhouse and main stand, which accommodates between 150 and 200 people. The application site is located within the defined green space within the settlement of Camberley. The site is accessed from Wilton Road in the southwest, with commercial units to the north and south, and residential properties on Crooner Road to the east. The wooded part of Crabtree Park lies to the west. The photo image extends the image to include up to Frimley Road, which has local shops and bus stops on a regular bus route. The Camberley to Aldershot rail line lies to the northwest corner of the site, with Watchmore Park beyond. The main access to the site is from Wilton Road, with an informal parking area provided to the west and north of the football ground. A secondary access used for emergency traffic is provided from Crooner Road. Here are the main buildings on the site, including the flat-roofed clubhouse building to the left and the main stand to the right. The floodlighting is also visible in this image looking northwards. This is a view eastwards from the top level of the main stand towards Crooner Road and the residential properties in the streets. This is the view westwards from the same position with the wooded part of Crabtree Park visible. The low west stand is visible behind the goal. It's a view of the informal parking area which wraps around the west and north of the ground. It's estimated that about 50 parking spaces are available on this land. This is the proposed site plan. This indicates the 3G main pitch located in a similar position to the current main pitch, but repositioned about 10 metres further east. A 3G 5-a-side pitches be provided towards the northwest corner of the site, and a 3G training pitch provided to the northeast corner of the site. The training pitch could accommodate up to 3 5-a-side pitches. The main stand would be moved to the south of the pitch, and the lower stand moved 10 metres behind the west goal. This allows the provision of a formal parking area accommodating 82 parking spaces, access from Wilton Road. Emergency vehicles would also access from Wilton Road with tracking details provided to demonstrate safe access. The access from Crooner Road would be closed for vehicular traffic. A raised platform would be provided to the north of the existing clubhouse with 2 stair accesses, provision of green walls and a landscaped area around which a raised seating platform would be provided. 2 basketball courts would be provided behind the clubhouse, which is to be refurbished. The clubhouse facilities would be expanded with existing facilities such as changing rooms, referee accommodation, toilets, etc., re-provided within a series of single-storey buildings adjacent to the relocated main stand on the south side of the main pitch. Biodiversity net gain is expected to be provided in part on-site with some provision off-site. This is the layout for the clubhouse and raised platform. This includes an extended bar area, cellar, kitchen and seating area with toilets to the right-hand side and a seating area with with the raised platform shown on the right-hand plan, which is the equivalent to a first floor plan. So the left-hand elevations show the side view of the clubhouse and the raised platform, which is on the right to the top one and on the left to the bottom one. So the right-hand plans show the front and rear elevation of the clubhouse without the platform shown on these drawings. And this includes the wood fin detail, which would stand above the flat roof structure. This is the front elevation of the clubhouse with the raised platform in front. Here is a 3D image of the raised platform, which shows it as quite a light structure. Here are some cross-sections of the site. The top view is a section looking northwards, with the clubhouse and platform centrally positioned, the car park to the left, and the residential properties in Crooner Road to the far right of the image. The view below is a section towards looking westwards with the low stand to the left-hand side and a cross view of the main stand, with the side view of the clubhouse and raised platform to the right. On both images, the floodlighting is shown with varying heights, with the highest on the main pitch and lowest over the five-a-side pitch. The varying heights of the floodlighting columns and a comparison with the existing floodlighting arrangements are set out in paragraph 4.7 of the agenda report. Whilst more floodlighting is proposed, they are lower than the existing floodlighting columns and use LED rather than halogen lights and will be better directed to limit impact on residential amenity and nature conservation impacts. The proposal would improve existing sport facilities in the borough, which is supported in principle in this more sustainable location. The provision of 3D pitch facilities under this application would reduce the current deficit for the borough as indicated in the sports pitch strategy. No objections to the proposal are raised by consultees and no material harm has been identified. The County Highway Authority has raised no objections considering its sustainable location, the traffic generation and proposed access and parking provision, and bearing in mind the current site use. Environmental Health have raised no objections to external lighting details and also raised no objections on noise grounds subject to a noise management plan. The Surrey Wildlife Trust have raised no objections on ecology grounds, requesting a dark corridor is provided to the west boundary at the edge of the woodland to reduce the impact on foraging and commuting bats. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out on the agenda report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carty. We don't have any public speakers on this application. We do have a councillor online who wishes to make a statement. Bob, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I've got a very low upload speed.
We can hear you now. If you'd like to make a statement.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm an observer for the football club, for the council, and I've been somewhat involved with the proposal, which I support for two reasons. One is that football and a lot of sport in professional facilities has to work by raising money on non-match day events, and this proposal supports the use of the club room for non-match days, which is very helpful. The second point is that the additional 3G facilities are really needed locally. 3G really helps because a lot more people get to play, and particularly a lot more youngsters get to play on good facilities. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I highly recommend Gareth Southgate's recent Dimbleby lecture on the importance of organised sport and role models in the form of sports coaches for young people, especially young boys who sometimes get a bit alienated. So sport for the youngsters is really important, and this development contributes to that. So for those two reasons, I support this application, although I'm not on the planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whitcroft, I believe you have some statements from two other councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been asked by the local members, councillors Kell and Lisa, Fine and Cook, just to make a short statement on their behalf. They're not able to be here tonight. The statement reads: the people of Watchetts and of Surrey Heath are very lucky to be the home of Camberley Town Football Club. As the ward representatives from Watchetts, we are both fully supportive of this application and excited to see the vision for the future of the site at Crooner Road. It's clear that there has been a big focus on not only on improving the grounds for players and supporters, but also for the larger community, with particular thought for players with disabilities and the families of everyone using the grounds. Having met with the club and listened to the passion they have for this project and the depth of thought that has gone into the conception of this application, we truly believe that the benefit to the wider community is evident. We urge the committee to approve this application. And Chair, I emphasise that that's the views of the local members, and not myself at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, do you have any questions of the planning officers, Kieran or John, for this application? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. It's just a quick question for the planning officer. You mentioned it's about floodlighting, and I think it's one of the possible objections would be the impact of floodlighting on residential properties. But I think you mentioned in your report that there's currently no controls over the floodlights that are there. Is this then, this application, a good opportunity to get some control over it and to minimise the impact? So actually, it might be a benefit in that regard for nearby residents. Thank you.
Yeah, currently the existing floodlighting, which went up in the 1970s, is not controlled. They use old halogen lights, and they also angle at different angles, so actual light spillage is quite high. By using sort of more modern, up-to-date LED lights, having them sort of flat-faced, having them directed downwards, you end up focusing the light into the space that needs the light. And on top of that, we're putting restrictions on the hours so that they don't. So when they're not used, or when the pitches aren't used, then they're switched off. That's all set up, obviously, with the amendments on the update. Just to very quickly, a couple of extra slides just in case they popped up, but just to give you a flavour of what it is. The bottom right picture it's very out of focus, but it's one I took on the site. Not realising I would have to show this to people, but this shows the sort of lighting arrangement that's existing on the existing stands. And these are some of the examples. The image sort of more central, the white image there, that's the one that they're proposing, and just gives you around it, the three around it, how they can be directed down. You can put baffles and things around it to try and help direct the light down. The Environmental Health have no issues now with the impact on residential community. We've been working with the Wildlife Trust on limiting the impact on the bats right at the western edge of the site. But yes, this is a way of managing that. Yes, there's more lamps than before, but they're lower and they'll be more directed down and away from residential, and as you say, they're more controllable.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Noble.
Thank you. At 7.4.6, it says the applicant has indicated that the site could be used for other field sports, such as American football, rugby league and rugby union. Do we know that that's actually the case, that there is the probability of multiple use?
That's certainly the idea for them, because as has been expressed in the comments from ward councillors about the way that the use, they're going to make quite a severe investment here, and they have to get some of that back in the future in the way that they use it. So there would be a wider use than existing. It's usually used for match day and training for the main, and that sort of wider use, the community use, is something which they are looking into. What that ends up being in terms of the sports that would use it, obviously they'll want to keep it flexible because they want to attract people to come in and not put off some of those uses. It's a 3G pitch which would be better used during the wet months as well. So the pitches may be waterlogged, theirs will be clear for use. There is a community services agreement that's required by condition to actually set out how they're going to be used, how they're going to work with local schools. During school time, they might be using those pitches. I understand that might be for free as well as part of their community base, but outside of that, when they'll be used, sort of weekday evenings, and the variety of sports that there, we'll wait and see through the community service agreement. They gave those as ideas as what they could use it for.
Councillor Clowett.
I just wondered why, it's the wrong one, never mind. I just wondered why it didn't go through in 2015. Do we know that?
It was granted.
I know it's granted, sorry, I didn't mean that.
But,
Why they didn't actually
I
do
don't
anything?
know. I've got a slide just to show you what the approved scheme looked like. It was a much larger, much more ambitious scheme than the one that we have now. The one now has been pared back. So the actual building at the top left is the new clubhouse, which is a 2-storey building. It's quite a big building, and they're just refurbishing the existing. That's the ground floor layout below, which is mainly put aside for change rooms and facilities like that. The upper floor is the sort of clubhouse type facilities. And then sort of to the front of it, I haven't got the first floor image, was actually the stand that sloped down to the pitch. And the actual plan layout shows it more centrally located. They were going to turn the pitch around 90 degrees, have 7 of those 5-side pitches, and put the line of car park on the west boundary there. But it did eat quite far into the Crabtree Park, and it was quite a... It had quite a lot of opposition to it at the time it came through. I don't know the reasons why. All I can put it down to is just expensive. It looks like quite an expensive project.
One of my questions, I mean, it's not really planning, but I did wonder how it was being funded.
That's something I don't know, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Members, do you have any other questions with officers? Councillor White.
It's not actually a question. It's as someone that comes from a footballing city, I can only say that I feel that a modernised football club in Camberley can only enhance the town centre. So I'm fully in favour of this application.
Thank you very much. Which city was that, by the way?
I don't
Well,
like
it
to
caused any
say the
hate in
word,
the
but the
room.
other club is Everton. I don't like to say where I come from.
Fair enough. Members, if you have no other questions, do you have any areas of this application you wish to debate or you wish to discuss? The officer's recommendations is grant, subject to conditions. Can I have a proposer and a second? Oh my gosh. And a seconder. Choose anyone you want.
Helen Whitcroft, proposer, and Valerie White, seconder.
We'll do
So all those for, please raise your hand. Grant, subject to conditions. That looks unanimous.
The application has been granted, subject to conditions. Now on to item number 6, application 20 Windsor Road, Chobham. Oh, let me just finish my intro, then I'll come to you. Ms Kimber, would you like to introduce the application, please?
Sorry, Chair, before
And Councillor Wheeler,
we
yes.
go into the introduction, if I could just say, I do know the cafe in question. It's obviously in my ward and one of the villages that I look after. I do actually also know the cafe owner, and I have had extensive contact from the cafe owner in relation to this, and I have spoken to or been in communication with the officer in relation to the previous application. And also this one, but obviously I come to the application with an open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Any other members have anything they wish to declare on this one that haven't already declared? Proceed. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so this application has been decided by the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Tedder. There are no updates. So that's a bit slower than I was expecting. So this is the application site, 20 Windsor Road, outlined in red. It is to the rear of number 18. It is the old sorting office for the former post office. The roof of the building can be seen as it is on site in the aerial image on the left. The application is for the retrospective planning permission for the change of use of the former sorting office to a residential dwelling. The building has been occupied as a dwelling since October of 2024. To give a little history for the site, permission was granted in 2018 for the conversion of the former sorting office to former dwelling, but this was not implemented within the 3-year time frame. So the image on the left shows the front of number 18 with the pedestrian access through to number 20, which is largely screened behind a fence. The image on the right was taken from the rear of number 18 and again shows the pedestrian access route to the site with Windsor Road in the background. The image on the left here shows number 20. There have been some alterations to the fenestration of the property for the conversion, but the works did not alter the footprint or the mass of the building. The image on the right shows the outside amenity area for the dwelling. A condition is recommended for details of hard and soft landscaping, which will provide privacy for the occupiers and a private garden area. So these two images show the site with a little more context. The image on the left was taken from the rear, from the car park of the community centre. There are also rugby pitches to the rear, so the dwelling tucks in behind the properties which front Windsor Road and is viewed against these properties from the rear. The image on the right shows the site and then further along Windsor Road. So this is the block plan. The primary difference between the previously granted conversion in 2018 and this application is the parking situation. Before, the garage of number 18, which is marked up there as a store, just here, if it moves, there we go. So that was to be removed to allow vehicular access to number 20. That is no longer proposed. So this application is car-free. The Highway Authority have raised an objection to this. The site is within the village centre, it's close to bus routes and is considered to be a sustainable location. Moving on to the floor plans, as you can see, the dwelling is a one-bedroom property and it is considered that one person who lives in a one-bedroom flat is less likely to own a car. The development would provide an additional dwelling. Although limited, it does have an impact towards the housing supply. There have been no alterations to the built form and there would be no demonstrable harm by granting planning permission. As such, application is recommended for conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Members, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a number of points to raise and queries. First and foremost, the classification of the building. I understand it should be a Class B8, which is storage or distribution, which is what a sorting office is. It's not a it's not a Class E classification. So if I could have clarity on that point, please. The next point is the minimum floor space, which was raised as an objection by the parish council. The minimum floor space for anybody above one bedroom dwelling normally would be 50 square metres, and this is below that. And I appreciate that for one person occupying it, that would be acceptable. Currently, the property is occupied by a family, so that's 2 people and a child. And previous to that, there were 3 adult males that were living in there. So my question is, can we enforce that this living space is only for one person? And if we can, there doesn't seem to be a condition on it. I noticed that you say that this is not substantially different to the previous application. The previous application was for a pharmacy at the front of the building, 2 flats above the pharmacy, so a reduced business use at the front, private amenity space, shared amenity space, and sufficient parking for the occupants therein. So I would argue that it's quite substantially different. The amount of residential amenity space, I have to say, I would like clarification on, please, as to where that was measured. Because on the previous application, they show one parking space adjacent to this property. If I could ask you, please, to flip back to the amenity area post. That's that one there, thank you, the proposed block plan. So if you take the line down, where it has the amenity area and the dotted line in front of it, that is my understanding of the amenity space that doesn't fall into the lease agreement with the current cafe owner. On the previous application, the 18, whatever it was application, that showed enough space for one full car parking space and a little bit of space between it, and the amenity space was shared amenity space, which is no longer on offer. One car parking space offers 11.52 square metres of area. So if I could have confirmation, please, as to where the amenity space is measured for, and just confirmation of both the width of that amenity space, I would be very grateful. The Highways Authority did say that this should be designated as a car-free property, and yet that isn't a condition, I believe, that we can actually apply or enforce, because it's not something that we would have direct control over. The lead authority for planning goes on to say that parking could be arranged under suitable agreement with the cafe owner. The cafe owner actually closes the car park when the cafe is closed. They have, it's a 3-bedroomed apartment, so just with their own use, with 2 teenagers and an adult living in the property, that is 3 car parking spaces already gone and required for the residential amenity above the cafe. So I have to say that I cannot support the officer's recommendation for approval on the basis that we cannot enforce the one person living in the property. And without being able to enforce the one person living in the property, the minimum space standards are not met. And as I said, so far, this property has had 3 adults and currently a family with a child, that there is no parking that is available for the site. The bus service that was referred to doesn't put Chopham in a sustainable location whatsoever. It would take, I think it's about 2 hours for them to take a bus into the village if they couldn't get there. And the bus service is at best sporadic. And I would also like, please, clarification on the amenity space as to how what is shown on the 18 application had 1.5 car parking spaces as amenity space versus the 67 odd square metres within this report. Thank you.
Use class?
Yeah, that's the first one. So on the use class, the report says it's Class E. And nowadays the use class covers, it changed in recent years and covers a multiple of different scenarios. I don't know on this particular building how it was used historically. It may well have been a B8 use, but it's kind of not a particularly useful argument either way. If that's an error, so be it. But actually, you're still considering it now as a C3 use.
If I could just come back on that, thank you, Mr. Partington. It was just indicative of the number of errors that are within the report.
Your next question was about the enforceability in terms of how many people live there. Well, clearly that is not something you're going to easily be able to enforce. That's not an enforceable condition that you would possibly be able to apply on an application. And that's the same with many development. units. You can't possibly control the numbers living all the time in a unit. But what we have to look at in generally is the size of the unit, the amenity space, the proportionality here is key as well. Now, the proportionality here is it's a small unit. We haven't had any complaints since it's been operating. The amenity space is in line with the requirements or the standards that we have for a one bedroom unit. In actual fact, even if there was no amenity space, you could still argue that it could still be acceptable because it's a guidance at the end of the day. But actually, amenity space is being provided with this proposal, so that's a positive. And then your questions in terms of the wider parking situation, Highways have made it clear, yes, it's a car-free development, but they also acknowledge there's plenty of parking on the highway. I think it's page 122 of the annex, which is actually there, where they reference the situation in terms, there's a note at the end of their comments, and they talk about car-free development, but they also talk about, yes, your point about, well, they could get agreement with the cafe owner, but the point is, it's one bed unit, or that's what it's on paper as. Even if there was 1, 2, 3 parking spaces, the impact on that area would not be significant, given that you've got the on-street parking. There's no particular concerns in the area in any event.
If I can come back, there is also the residential amenity, the internal residential space, which is designed which meets the standards for a single occupant. But as Mr. Partington has just said, that's not something that is enforceable, and therefore it doesn't meet the design standards for what could be, and is at the moment, a family living there. And prior to that, it was 3 adults that were actually occupying it. In terms of the statement that there are no parking restrictions outside, that's also not quite accurate. So the zigzag lines that relate to the doctor's surgery and the crossing in front of the doctor's surgery actually abut the bottom corner. So if you were to go parallel, but slightly further on, you can't see it there. You can see what you're looking at there is vehicles that are parked actually on the pavement and not on the road. So as we're looking at it there, the zigzag lines is pretty much in line with the front of the car that you can see, and that's to protect people that are crossing on the crossing across to the doctor's surgery. The doctor's surgery, as per the report, is directly next door to this property and has just 2 car parking spaces for patients plus 1 disabled space. Immediately opposite here, there is yellow lines which were put in at the request of the residents at the Grange because they found exiting the site very difficult with the dental surgery, which is next door, and again puts a great deal of pressure on the parking in this area. So there is already a huge amount of parking unhappiness in this area, and visibility splays and turning circles coming out of the Grange immediately opposite, which is a site for more mature residents. If we could flick back, please, on some of the photographs, and I'll just show you one of my other concerns. So if you could flip back. Okay, so there we talked about residential access to the other side of that fence. There isn't enough residential access. I'm sure that's what you said in the report, but maybe not. So residents currently go up towards the garage, zigzag to the right-hand side, have to walk over the entrance to, if you look at the right-hand picture, what you're looking at there is not the property, but the storage space for the cafe. So you have access into that garage that is required at all times, and the access into that storage space is actually to the rear of the property. It isn't through the garage doors. There's a door that is there. So that doesn't show the site itself. It is showing the storage area that is related to the cafe. And you can see there that even a bicycle access around to the rear would be very difficult because it has to cross the threshold that goes into the flat. If we could just look at, go back again, please, sorry. I'm not absolutely sure, sorry. The other way. actually, if we go back to the aerial photograph, we can see on that aerial photograph, if you take the line down from just the other side of the storage area, you can see a very small amenity space area. So if, as I said, if I could just have clarification on where the amenity space was measured from, given that 11.32 1.5 car parking spaces, which was all that was shown that was there on the previous application, I'd be really grateful, because at least that would alleviate one concern.
Okay, so the previous application it was for what is outlined there in red and blue, it was the whole site. Yeah. It did cover the commercial use, it covered more residential at number 18, and it covered this outbuilding. The shared amenity space was to the rear of number 18. There was a parking space to the front of number 20, and number 20 would have had no private amenity space at all. This application, it's this space, so between where you've got the back of the garage / store, which is what is shown on the right, that belongs to number 18, and then the drainage ditch across, all of that is the application site. So it's that tarmacked area and the bit that's covered by the front door, so to the right of number 20, that's all that's been measured for this application to give the private amenity space for the dwelling.
So for clarity, my understanding from the lease agreements is that the private amenity space goes directly across from the garage, and in the 18 application that showed enough space for 1 car parking space and half a car parking space, which, as I said, the average car parking space was 11.32 square metres. So we've got from 11.23 square metres for a car parking space, plus let's have another half, so let's say 15 square metres, to 67 square metres.
I don't have the plans in front of me from 2018 to measure, but that space there is more than 11.5 square metres. I have measured it. That space, the bit to the side that's covered, gives the total amenity area for that. Yeah.
I guess the key point is that we've got to assess the application as presented. So I do appreciate the comments on the 2018 one. It's very difficult for us to verify that at this time, but I know that that site has been assessed recently by the case officer, and that was the number we got. And I just thought it'd be worth mentioning, I know you raised the other point in relation to occupation, we are charging it Sang and Sam, so there is that element of it as well. And I know it doesn't affect the occupation, but we can't condition that, but I do appreciate the concerns.
Sorry, thank you, and I appreciate that. I have in front of me a copy of the lease for the cafe. The lease for the cafe goes in a straight line right the way down the fence to the other side of the garage. So if you could go back to the site that shows you the overall, back again, that's it. So where it goes down, we're talking about that amenity space there. If you could confirm, please, that it was measured in a straight line from that fence that comes down to the front of the building, and that constitutes 67 square metres, then I'm more than happy to remove my objection on that basis. I know that the front space was measured when somebody came out in terms of sort of the access across the front, but I believe that you said that it went down to the entrance to the other property. That is not the amenity space that is available for this property.
I think that one shows it better where you've got the drainage ditch. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's where it's measured across.
I'm sorry, but the drainage ditch comes through looking at that at an angle. If you look at this plan here, it's a straight line down.
It was measured on this plan where that line goes just beneath the word area.
I don't know if we can access the other planning application that shows that at 11.32 square metres for a car parking space, but...
I'm not sure we'd be able to do it within the timescales of the meeting, but I would ask, does it make a material difference to how we would consider the planning application? And I appreciate that might be the case for yourself, but that would be the other question I would put back. But I'm happy to clarify after the meeting. I know it's after the event, but we can look into that.
Any other members? Do you have questions of officers? Councillor Garrett?
I just want to pick up on something that Councillor Wheeler said about the property, forgetting there were 3 men living in a 1-bedroom previously. We've got a family in there now, and it is only 1 bedroom, is that right? It literally is 1 bedroom.
Yes.
Okay, and it's a family, what? 2 adults and a child?
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't sound ideal as far as safeguarding goes. I would suggest that I would fancy our environmental health going in and visiting, because as a person who gets involved with schools a lot, that doesn't sound like that's something I would... I mean, I don't think we can have it as a planning condition, I get that, but if the adults are living in the bedroom then the child's not, which means they're sleeping on a sofa, potentially, or a put-me-up, or the child's living in the bedroom and then the 2 adults aren't, neither of those things sound particularly good for me. I know it's not a planning consideration, but I've brought this up when we've had an issue before, and I think I would seriously want someone to go in and look at those conditions.
Councillor Garrett, you've got the details for the application. You could forward that on to the relevant...
No, that's for the officers to do.
Yeah,
I'm
happy.
planning, I'm sure Gavin or someone had a word with the environment.
I'm happy to take it away and speak to environmental health colleagues, but as you say, I don't think it's something we can consider in this forum, but happy to take that away.
Thank you.
Councillor Quinn?
Thank you. Kind of linking it to planning, I feel very sorry for the family that are living in this 1-bedroom house. It really indicates, the housing shortage that we're suffering in our borough, that there are families living in overcrowded accommodation that isn't suitable, and I'm sure this family won't be the only one. So for me, that will definitely be part of the balance in determining whether to approve this application, that at least it does add 1 small property to the housing supply, and we desperately need, obviously, more suitable housing to be constructed in our borough too.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler?
Sorry, can I just point out that the internal space of this property is below our residential design guide for anything other than a property for a single occupant. So the space for anything above a single occupant is, I think, 50-odd square metres, and this one is below that. We may, on balance, consider that as only marginal, but given that we can't enforce that only 1 person lives here, which has been stated, given that we've got guidance from county that we should specify that it's a non-car dwelling, and I can assure you it isn't and hasn't been, and there's nothing that we can do in terms of conditioning that, we surely, therefore, on those grounds, have to refuse this application.
It comes down to the proportionality argument I put to you earlier. It's also about, I hear the concerns about how many people may be living there, but actually it's a small unit ultimately. It's actually that proportionality of the size of the unit, the proportionate size of amenity space, how many parking spaces in practice it's actually going to deliver. So you have to consider that as well. And those wider issues, that is something that I believe is covered. All the elements of this application in terms of the 1 person and the parking, and the fact that even if there was a couple living there, the actual parking impacts would not be significant, and you have to consider that in your deliberations as well.
So for clarity, there were 3 cars for the last group of occupants.
Councillor Wheeler, just your question about the amenity site size, we just actually measured it online. It is coming up as 42.5 square metres. Answer that part.
Thank you. That's 25 square metres less than stated in the report.
I made a rough calculation just as a
That's the front
Try and-
section, I mean, it doesn't include the side or the back, I guess.
Yeah.
This application, we'll discuss it. If no, the officer's recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Proposer Jonathan Quinn, seconder Kevin Thompson.
All those for the officer's recommendation to grant subject to conditions, please raise your hand. This is 4. So I'm going to call the names out. We've got Councillor Mary Glowett, Councillor Liz Noble, Councillor David O'Mahony, Councillor Jonathan Quinn, Councillor Kevin Thompson, Councillor David Whitcroft, Councillor Helen Whitcroft, and Councillor Richard Wilson. All those against? Councillor Sean Garrett, Councillor Victoria Wheeler, and Councillor Valerie White. Any abstentions? No abstentions.
Thank you very much. The application has been granted subject to conditions. That brings our business to a close this evening. Have a lovely weekend, long weekend, everybody. And I won't see you on the next one because I'm going to my daughter's wedding. So you'll have Mr. Wilson in his kilt doing his bit. Oh no, it's me wearing the kilt that night. Sorry, yeah.